Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the reasons why women work too much.
Okay.
And our source material for that is going to be Women Who Work Too Much by Tamu.
Great.
It's not your typical self-help book. It's really more of a soulful exploration into self-care, connection, and social justice, especially as it pertains to women.
Sounds interesting.
And to help us navigate these complex topics, I've invited an expert.
Wonderful to be here.
So
I love this book. I think it really goes beyond just sort of surface level advice and actually gets into the sort of systemic and societal structures that contribute to this pretty widespread issue.
And that's a great point, because right out of the gate, the book introduces this concept of toxic productivity, this like persistent need to be productive all the time.
Yeah.
Like sacrificing the present for some future promise of fulfillment.
Right. And I mean, I think the question is, what is fueling that fixation on productivity?
Right.
And Thomas makes a really clever analogy, I think, of comparing productivity to a modern day religion.
Oh.
Where success is the ultimate salvation.
I see.
So it's almost as if rest or prioritizing anything outside of work is considered sacrilegious.
Yeah, and she has this really great quote in the book where she says that, being labeled lazy and unproductive is the new cardinal sin.
Right.
Which, really resonates in today's world. Right?
Absolutely.
All this hustle culture and pressure to do it all, it's relentless.
It is. It's and it comes from, I think, a very deep-seated societal conditioning that puts output above well-being.
Well, for sure.
And women, I think, are often particularly susceptible to feeling guilty when they take breaks or rest or prioritize personal needs over the demands of work.
Absolutely. And there's this really relatable story in the book about how the author herself is on her way to court to give expert testimony, and she's having a panic attack.
Wow.
And she's actually good at her job.
Right.
So it just really shows how insidious this toxic productivity can be. That it permeates even the most successful lives.
Right. It really underscores how deeply we've internalized this belief that our worth is tied to our productivity. To the point where, our bodies are literally sounding the alarm.
So then the book kind of goes on this quest to sort of uncover the roots of this overworking drive.
Yeah.
And encourages us to reflect on our childhood experiences and examine the role models and societal expectations that have shaped us.
Right. And it is fascinating, I think, to see how much early experiences and the messages that we receive early on shape our beliefs about work and success and our self-worth.
Absolutely.
And the book even has some really insightful journal prompts that can guide you through that reflection process.
Yeah. And one example that really stood out to me was the author's Auntie Yamanata, who was like this successful international businesswoman who kind of seemed to defy this narrative of ceaseless work and delayed gratification. She just embodied this vibrance and joy and really embraced life fully.
That's beautiful. And it challenges this assumption that success has to come at the expense of personal fulfillment.
Right.
It suggests that there are other models where well-being and achievement can actually coexist.
Definitely. And then the book gets even bigger and tackles some of the larger societal issues head on.
Yeah.
And presents this oppressive trinity of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism.
Right.
And how they intersect and actually condition women, especially women of color, into overworking.
These systems create such a complex web of pressure.
They do.
And they sort of compel women to overfunction in both their professional and their personal lives.
For sure.
There's this constant expectation that women will excel in the workplace while simultaneously shouldering the burden of, domestic duties and emotional labor at home.
Totally. And it doesn't let men off the hook either.
Of course not.
It explores how patriarchal expectations impact men's emotional expression and their ability to really connect. And even delves into this concept of weaponized incompetence, where men will deliberately do tasks poorly so they don't have to do them anymore.
Yeah.
It's very sneaky.
It's subtle, but it's so powerful.
It is.
And women often feel obligated to just take over to avoid further stress or conflict,
Totally.
which just further solidifies these traditional gender roles and perpetuates the cycle of overwork.
Right, absolutely. And it shows up in all these everyday situations, men helping with chores in a way that actually creates more work for women.
Exactly.
So then it brings us to this really crucial concept of the mind-body connection, where Thomas really emphasizes understanding our nervous system. And it's not just about meditation or mindfulness,
Right.
but really recognizing the physiological consequences of pushing ourselves beyond our limits.
The chronic stress that comes from overwork keeps our bodies in this perpetual state of, fight, flight, or freeze,
Wow.
which disrupts our natural rhythms and has a profound impact on both our physical and mental health.
And she introduces this idea of autonomic ways
Yes.
to explain how our bodies actually prioritize different functions
Right.
based on perceived threats.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
It's like our body has this built-in intelligence system
Right.
to try to keep us safe and functioning.
And then the book goes on to talk about honoring women's hormonal cycles and circadian rhythms, which, kind of goes beyond the typical self-care advice.
It does.
It's really acknowledging how these natural fluctuations impact our energy levels and our emotional states.
Right. And encouraging us to actually factor that into our work plans and the boundaries that we set.
Right, because if we disregard those natural rhythms, it can really lead to burnout and reduce productivity.
Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting how often those natural rhythms are disregarded or even pathologized in our society.
Well,
We're expected to function at this consistent level of productivity regardless of, where we are in our cycle or, how we're feeling physically or emotionally.
like our energy just has to be the same every day.
Exactly. And it's just not realistic.
No, it's not. And,
Yeah.
and there's this really insightful exercise in the book where she has you assess your next range of motion.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. And it's like this metaphor for understanding your bandwidth, like the difference between your capability and your actual capacity.
It's such a brilliant illustration of how we often function beyond our capacity.
We do.
Ignoring the signs of burnout until it's too late.
Right. And so the book really underscores the importance of setting boundaries and mastering the art of saying no to safeguard that bandwidth.
Which can be really hard.
Oh, it can be so hard, especially when we're conditioned to be so accommodating and helpful all the time.
Absolutely.
And there's this story in the book about Vicky, who's this high-achieving woman who's experiencing burnout, but she just keeps labeling herself as tired.
I've been there.
Right? Like it's such a perfect example of how we deny our limitations and push ourselves to the point of exhaustion.
And I think it's important to remember that saying no is not a weakness.
Totally.
It's a necessary act of self-preservation.
It is.
It's about protecting our energy and our well-being.
So from there, the book kind of goes on to explore the importance of authentic relationships. And not just with other people, but with ourselves as well.
Right.
It really advocates for cultivating self-compassion and embracing vulnerability in our interactions.
Because so often we're conditioned to prioritize the needs of others above our own.
Oh, we're sure.
Which can lead to this kind of self-abandonment.
Right.
So the book encourages us to reclaim our needs, establish healthy boundaries, and really prioritize our own well-being.
And that brings us to the central message of the book, which is choosing yourself.
Absolutely.
And Thomas really emphasizes that this is not selfish.
No, it's not.
But rather a radical act of self-care and a really powerful way to start dismantling these oppressive systems.
It's about recognizing our inherent worth and value.
Exactly. And for marginalized groups especially, this choice can be so challenging.
It can be incredibly difficult
Yeah.
because they're often taught to put others' needs first. But the book offers these really inspiring examples of women, like the author herself, embracing her natural hair despite facing criticism, to show how choosing yourself can be a form of resistance.
It's powerful.
It is.
And finally, the book introduces this idea of regenerative self-care,
Yes.
which goes beyond those typical self-care practices
Yes.
and embraces this much more holistic approach to well-being and social justice.
It's not just about, taking a bubble bath or getting a massage.
Right.
It's about creating systems and practices that support collective well-being.
I like that.
It's about understanding how our individual choices contribute to a more just and equitable world for everyone.
That's great. So we've covered a lot in this first part of our exploration of women who work too much. And it's clear that this book is about so much more than just finding a better work-life balance.
It is.
It's really about understanding the complex interplay of societal conditioning, systemic oppression, and our own personal choices that all contribute to women's overwork.
And I think the key takeaway here is that it's not about blaming women for their circumstances.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's about empowering them with the knowledge and the tools to challenge these patterns, reclaim their agency, and prioritize their well-being as a radical act of self-love.
Awesome.
So stay tuned.
Yes, we got more to come.
It's not about reaching this perfect state of balance or anything. It's more like an ongoing process of unlearning all that kind of harmful conditioning and then trying to build a world that's fair and just for everyone.
And one thing I really appreciated was how the book made self-care like a key part of well-being and not just some like frivolous luxury.
Absolutely.
It's about how to like replenish our energy so we can engage more fully in all parts of our lives. And it even offers like really practical, accessible ways to nourish our nervous systems.
Right.
Like body scan meditations and breath work.
Right. They're very grounding. They help us reconnect with our bodies and help regulate our nervous systems. And I think they can be really powerful tools for disrupting that cycle of chronic stress and cultivating a greater sense of inner peace.
Speaking of cycles, let's talk about menstrual cycles. Yeah. The book really dives into how these hormonal fluctuations throughout the month can impact our energy levels, our emotional states, even our cognitive function.
It's amazing how often those natural rhythms are disregarded or even, pathologized in our society.
It is.
Like we're expected to function at this consistent level of productivity regardless of where we are in our cycle,
right.
Which is just not realistic or sustainable.
It's not. And so Thomas encourages us to, track our cycles and adjust our workloads and self-care practices accordingly.
Makes sense.
So, for example, during the menstrual phase, when our estrogen and progesterone levels are at their lowest, we might need more rest, more self-compassion, whereas during the ovulatory phase, when our energy levels are usually higher, we might feel more equipped to take on those demanding tasks.
Right. So it's about working with our bodies instead of against them.
Totally.
Recognizing and respecting our cyclical nature.
Exactly.
And potentially, harnessing those natural ebbs and flows in energy and focus to our advantage.
And the book does a really good job of connecting those hormonal shifts to the larger conversation about societal expectations. Like how the pressure to maintain constant productivity can really clash with the natural rhythms of our bodies.
It challenges this idea that we have to be on all the time.
Always performing.
Right. And instead suggests this more cyclical approach to both work and life,
Right.
where we accommodate those periods of rest and rejuvenation alongside those periods of, more intense focus and output.
And then it extends this exploration beyond just the monthly cycles to our understanding of circadian rhythms.
Right.
Like those inherent patterns of sleep and wakefulness that govern our bodies.
It's so important.
It is.
And our modern lifestyles often disrupt these natural rhythms.
Absolutely.
Which leads to sleep deprivation and fatigue and all sorts of health issues.
It's true.
So the book emphasizes establishing routines that support our natural sleep patterns.
Right.
Like having consistent bedtime rituals and minimizing exposure to blue light before bed.
That can be tough in our hyper-connected world.
It can.
But sleep is so important.
It's essential.
And it's not just about feeling rested.
Yeah.
It's fundamental to our physical and mental well-being.
Absolutely. Sleep is when our bodies repair and regenerate.
Right.
It's crucial for hormone regulation, cognitive function, emotional resilience, you name it.
And the book presents this whole discussion about boundaries as a form of self-leadership.
Interesting.
Making conscious decisions about how we allocate our time and energy and being really intentional about what we allow into our lives.
Because we have a limited amount of bandwidth, right?
We do.
That capacity to manage the demands of work and relationships and life in general.
It's a finite resource.
It is, and protecting it becomes our responsibility.
And to do that effectively, we need to be clear about our values and priorities.
Right, what truly matters to us.
Exactly. And then aligning our actions with those values.
When we operate from that place of clarity and intention-setting boundaries becomes less about just saying no.
I see.
And more about saying yes to the things that genuinely align with our authentic selves.
So it's about shifting away from that people-pleasing, over-functioning mode and stepping into a more empowered and genuine way of being in the world.
It's about reclaiming our agency and making conscious choices to create a life that feels aligned and meaningful and filled with joy.
Which brings us to one of the most important aspects highlighted in the book, the profound importance of authentic relationships. Thomas argues that we can't truly thrive in isolation.
We need connection.
We do.
We need those genuine connections with others who can offer us support and encouragement.
And creating those connections requires vulnerability.
It does.
Letting go of the masks we often wear and allowing ourselves to be seen for who we truly are.
Which can be really scary.
Well, it can be terrifying, especially when we've been conditioned to believe that showing our true selves is a sign of weakness or that it makes us undesirable.
Right. But the book really champions this idea of cultivating self-compassion,
Right.
treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a close friend.
And that looks like what?
It's about recognizing that we're all imperfect
We are.
and that our perceived flaws are actually part of what makes us unique and worthy of love.
So it's about creating a safe space within ourselves.
Right.
To embrace our imperfections and present our authentic selves to the world.
And that, in turn, allows us to connect more deeply and meaningfully with others.
Because we're not hiding anymore.
Right. It's about understanding that our worthiness doesn't need to be earned.
I like that.
It's not about our achievements or our productivity.
It's inherent.
We are deserving of love and belonging simply because we exist.
That is a powerful message, especially in a world that often tells us we need to achieve certain things or look a certain way to be considered valuable.
It's about challenging those narratives and choosing to believe in our inherent worthiness, regardless of any external validation.
And that act of choosing yourself is really what this book is all about.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the power we have to shape our own lives, to define success on our own terms.
And to create a reality that reflects our values.
To reclaim our time and energy and attention.
And direct those resources towards the things that truly matter to us.
It's about honoring ourselves and embracing a life that feels aligned and joyful and fulfilling.
And it's not just about individual well-being either.
Right.
Choosing yourself is a way to start dismantling the oppressive systems that contribute to this problem of women overworking in the first place.
Because when we choose ourselves, we're modeling a different way of being in the world.
Right, one that prioritizes well-being and genuine connection and authenticity.
And hopefully inspiring others to do the same.
It's about creating a collective shift towards a more just and equitable world for all.
This exploration of women who work too much has been so insightful.
It has.
It's clear that this book offers a really fresh perspective on the challenges that women face in today's society.
It goes beyond those surface-level tips for work-life balance and really delves into those deeper societal structures and personal beliefs that fuel this issue.
And most importantly, it empowers women to make different choices.
Right, to reclaim their agency.
To live a life that's truly aligned with their values.
It's really a call to action, inviting women to step into their power and redefine success on their own terms and create a world that actually supports their well-being.
And a big part of that is recognizing the strength in collective action. Women supporting each other, sharing their experiences, and working together to challenge those norms.
There's so much power in unity.
Oh, absolutely.
When women come together and amplify each other's voices, they can create real lasting change.
I love that.
And the book encourages us to build those communities of support, share resources and advocate for policies that actually prioritize women's well-being.
It's about knowing that we're not in this alone, right?
Exactly.
There's a whole network of women out there who are ready to offer support and lift each other up.
And it's not just about women supporting women either.
Sure.
It's about engaging men in this conversation too.
Right.
Encouraging them to examine their own conditioning and become allies in creating a more equitable world.
Well, and the book actually has a whole chapter dedicated to exploring how patriarchal expectations impact men.
It does.
It talks about how those rigid gender roles can restrict men's emotional expression and actually hinder their ability to connect authentically.
Because men are also victims of these societal structures.
They are.
They're often taught to suppress their emotions, to be stoic and self-reliant.
Right.
Which can lead to feelings of isolation and disconnection.
So it's about challenging those harmful stereotypes and encouraging men to embrace a wider range of emotional expression.
The book envisions a world where both men and women can fully embrace their true selves without fear of judgment or rejection.
And that brings us to this final concept of regenerative self-care. This idea that self-care goes beyond just pampering ourselves and involves creating practices and systems that nurture our well-being on a much deeper level.
It's about shifting our perspective, beyond just the individual.
Right.
And recognizing that we're all interconnected. It's about understanding how our choices impact the collective and how we can contribute to a more just and sustainable world.
And the book gives some really great practical examples of regenerative self-care, like spending time in nature.
Right.
Nurturing our relationships with loved ones, engaging in creative pursuits.
These practices help us reconnect with our values, tap into our creativity and cultivate a greater sense of purpose and meaning in our lives.
They can be really grounding and restorative.
Absolutely. They counteract the effects of stress and promote a deeper sense of inner peace.
Regenerative self-care really acknowledges that our well-being is tied to the well-being of our communities and the planet.
It's about embracing a more holistic and sustainable way of life.
It's powerful to realize that when we truly care for ourselves, we're also caring for the world around us.
It is, and it's about recognizing that true joy and fulfillment don't come from those external measures of success.
Right.
They come from living in alignment with our values and creating a life that's full of meaning and purpose.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into women who work too much,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways we should remember?
Well, first, remember that overworking isn't a personal failing. It often stems from societal conditioning and systemic oppression. So acknowledge those forces in your own life.
Second, prioritize your well-being.
Absolutely.
Self-care is essential for showing up as your best self in all areas of life.
Right.
Embrace those practices that nourish your nervous system and honor your unique rhythms.
Third, cultivate authentic relationships. Surround yourself with people who support you and encourage you.
Good advice.
Allow yourself to be vulnerable and embrace your true self.
Number 4, establish clear boundaries.
Yes. Protect your time, your energy, your attention.
Learn to say no to things that don't align with your values.
And finally, make the conscious choice to prioritize yourself, define success on your own terms, and create a life that feels authentic, joyful, and truly fulfilling.
And remember, you have the power to create a different reality for yourself.
You do.
And in doing so, you inspire others to do the same.
Take a deep breath, honor your needs, and step into your power.
Love it.
You deserve to thrive.
This concludes our deep dive into women who work too much. We hope you found this exploration insightful and empowering, and if you'd like to delve even deeper, I encourage you to check out Tamu Thomas's book, Remember True Joy and Fulfillment Are Within Your Reach. So choose yourself, prioritize your well-being, and create a life that lights you up. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep choosing you.